Just after midnight on January 1st, 2015, I wrote my first text of the year. I didn't do it because I was religious. I did it because the movie I just watched had told me to, and because I'd never been bossed around by a movie before, and I was intrigued.
We have a very special message from a very good friend.
I want everyone to go to their contacts and click on everybody you know and text them. 3 simple words. God's not dead.
Would I have sent that text if I knew that a single Christian film would turn into hundreds over the next 10 years, each worse than the last, always looking for that next hit? It became an obsession that my friends ended up telling me I could only talk about on my birthday or after midnight on New Year's, because it was getting to be a little bit much for everyday conversation. Not only could I not stop, I didn't want to stop. I started recognizing the key players in Christian cinema, people who kept playing lawyers and doctors and atheists who used to be religious, but something really bad happened to them, so now they're angry at God. So they believe in God, but they don't. They're angry, and they're atheists. And I got to watch as this one box office hit created this weird new wave of Christian independent cinema that was like an echo chamber, where all the plots are about people banning Christmas and not being able to mention Jesus and taking away people's Bibles and not letting people homeschool kids. I just couldn't look away. So if you asked me again if I would have sent that text knowing all that, my answer would be yes. I would have sent that text if I lived 100 more times. You know why? Because I don't. But if there's one thing I do know is that knowledge can be a terrible burden. And I think it's finally time I confess my sins. If your brain isn't full of useless facts about the Christian film industry like mine is, let me give you a quick primer. As long as there's been movies, there's been Jesus movies. In the last century, there's been some faith-based films that have been extremely successful. Ben-Hur won 11 Academy Awards. The DreamWorks animation The Prince of Egypt was met with critical acclaim. And of course, Mel Gibson's The Passion of the Christ was the most profitable Christian film to date. But when I think about the kind of Christian films I like, I don't think about any of these movies. There's this whole other magical world of low-budget, low-quality films that exist in almost a parallel space to Hollywood. In this world, you don't need to know how to produce or write or act to be a filmmaker. You just get some friends together from church to pitch in, or you tap your rich oil friend on the shoulder so you can hire Kevin Sorbo, and you get to work. It's honestly inspiring if you ignore what the movies are about and who makes them and what they say and what they do. It's inspiring. Honestly, I know it's a big effort to make a movie, even a bad movie. And so on some level, I am envious of these people who just go out and make a film and they don't worry about whether or not it's good or if people should see it or if their story matters. They don't seem to have that same voice of doubt in their head. But after watching some of these movies, I think maybe a little bit of doubt might be a good thing for creative development. It seems like the entire independent Christian film industry is built on people who believe what they're saying is the most important thing in the world, and they gotta say it. But if we're talking about God's Not Dead, which we are, it is definitely not a Hollywood film. But it was built on a very sturdy foundation. One thing that sets it apart from similar Christian films at the time was that it was produced by PureFlix, which is basically the Christian version of Netflix. PureFlix was co-founded in 2005 by David A.R. White, who actually appears in this film. You may recognize him from some of his earlier work.
Hey, Scotty. Jesus, man.
This movie made almost $65 million during its theatrical run. It only cost $2 million to make, so it was a massive financial success. And like most modern Christian films, it received very bad reviews from critics and very good reviews from the audience. Something else that helped this film was that it featured a number of notable Christian celebrities. We got Kevin Sorbo, David A.R. White, Dean Cain, some of the cast from Duck Dynasty, and the Christian rock band Newsboys. A real cream of the crop, you might say. And one more thing I think that makes this movie really, really special is that it contains so many characters, so many storylines, and this plot that basically is an amalgamation of every single Christian movie trope that you can find in modern Christian cinema. People have designed bingo sheets and drinking games around it. It's that good. And when I say good, I mean extremely convoluted and extremely complicated. So what's this movie about, you ask? Well, buckle up. I'm about to tell you. God's Not Dead is about a Christian student named Josh. He shows up to philosophy class and he finds out his teacher, Professor Radisson, is an angry and mean man who hates God.
This semester, I propose that we refuse to waste our limited time together debating the existence of the big man in the sky. All that I require from each of you is that you fill in the papers I've just given you with 3 little words: God is dead.
All these stupid students, they sign their paper. But you know who doesn't? Josh.
Mr. Wheaton, is something wrong?
Yeah, I can't. I can't do what you want. I'm a Christian.
Mr. Radisson says, if you refuse to sign this paper, then you have to get up at that podium and prove beyond a reasonable doubt that God really exists. Okay, says Josh. Can do. I mean, that's the film.
Why do you hate God? Answer the question. Science supports his existence. You know the truth. Why do you hate God?
Because he took everything away from me.
How can you hate someone if they don't exist?
God is not dead.
There, I just saved you 2 hours. There are a lot of other plots happening in this film.
We've gotten wind of a merger, and the Japanese could care less about insider trading.
I'm pretty sure the main focus of this movie is to convince people that God's not dead. So I think it's important we look at all the characters who are converted during this film. So who are these converts? Let's find out. Okay, so first we have the class. Presumably every single person was converted during this speech, and so I got in there, I counted it, 67. Wait a minute. This one guy's not standing. Look at his face. Okay, I'm gonna go with 66. Then there's Aisha, a Muslim student who is Christianity curious. Her little brother narcs her out to her extremely violent father, who beats her and then kicks her out of the house.
No, Mama, Jesus is my Lord and Savior, and he died to save me from my sin. No!
I think this part's a little on the nose even for this film. But you know what? It's not all bad. Because of this, Aisha converts to Christianity, and then it's implied at the very end that she gets together with Josh, so it's all good. Amy is a left-wing atheist blogger. She finds out she has cancer.
Your results came back positive.
I don't have time for cancer.
Her boyfriend breaks up with her.
You understand that I might die.
I'm sorry about that.
She's super sad, but don't worry. She meets the newsboys. They pray over her. She converts to Christianity.
Hey guys, we're gonna roll.
She's left with a sense of well-being. Almost as if in God's Not Dead 2, she'll find out that her cancer has completely disappeared. And then we have Martin, who's a student from China.
What does PRC stand for?
People's Republic of China.
Seriously?
Oh yes, always serious.
He's probably the easiest conversion in the whole film. He's really isolated here. He doesn't have any friends. And to be honest, it seems like he's more interested in like Josh's confidence and conviction than he is Jesus. He also tries to convert his businessman dad,
上帝，为什么说上帝？
but does not succeed. But you know what? Ain't no harm in trying. And then, of course, we got God's biggest win in this film. Professor Radisson gets blasted by a car. He's laying on the pavement. The 2 reverends show up. They say he ain't gonna make it.
His ribs are crushed. His lungs are filling with blood. He doesn't have long.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
And while he's laying there, he converts to Christianity. And then he dies. I think Reverend Jude summarizes it pretty well when he gives this little speech at the end.
What happened here tonight is a cause for celebration.
You hate to see it, but you'll love to watch it. If my math is correct, that means that 70 people were converted on screen during this film. I would guess there's more kids on campus who, after they found out their teacher got turned inside out by a car, decided to convert to Christianity out of fear at what an angry God can do. But you know what? That's for the fan fiction to decide. And I don't want to discredit the amount of people I texted that night after watching that movie. I mean, who knows? Maybe I converted some too. As of 2024, there have been 4 films released in the God's Not Dead cinematic universe, and there's a 5th one coming this fall. Of course, we have the original God's Not Dead, which you now are very familiar with. The second film, God's Not Dead 2, He's Surely Alive, has Melissa Joan Hart of Sabrina the Teenage Witch fame. She plays a history teacher who faces legal action because she mentioned Jesus in her class.
One of your students sent a text to their parents. Did this happen?
If you're asking whether I responded to a student's question, yes.
And your answer incorporated the words of Jesus.
What were you thinking, Grace?
The third film is God's Not Dead, A Light in the Darkness, which centers around David A.R. White's Reverend Dave, whose church is burned down by atheists.
What's the church doing on a state campus in the first place?
This was my father's church, and it's not for sale.
This one actually took a pretty big hit in the box office. The fourth film is God's Not Dead, We the People, which is about a group of Christians who are homeschooling their kids improperly. They're given a week to prove the education they're providing is adequate. Not even great, just decent.
This is bigger than just homeschooling. I think we should fight this. We need to.
This is the first movie in the franchise that I believe actually lost money. With these dwindling numbers, I don't have a lot of confidence the fifth movie is going to be a big hit. But that doesn't mean I'm not going to see it. I don't really think that box office returns on their own are the best way to judge the success of these films. PureFlix, which if you remember produced this movie, is a pretty successful streaming service that uses God's Not Dead to draw new people in. They were actually acquired by Sony in 2020. In 2023, they merged with Great American Media to create the unholy spawn that is now called Great American PureFlix. Beyond PureFlix, there's actually a ton of other places that are funding and releasing this kind of content. In fact, a really rancid Christian sitcom called The Potwins, also starring Kevin Sorbo, started airing this year as the first ever TV show to launch exclusively on Elon Musk's X. And of course, there are a ton of other options, including, but not limited to, Redeem TV, Answers TV, Yippee, Minnow, Bible Project, Right Now Media, Angel Studios, and Crossflix Plus, just to name a few. The Christian film industry is growing. Movies have bigger budgets, and some are even difficult to differentiate from real Hollywood productions. So what does that mean for my weird obsession? I know I'm not the target demographic for Christian films. I'm not religious, and unless the newsboys show up to pray over my body, I probably never will be. There are people out there who hate watch Christian films, but I really don't think that's what I'm doing. When I watch a Christian film, I feel like I'm an alien, watching a primitive form of human life. I really want to understand them because they live on the same planet as us. But unlike me, they spend a lot of brain power posting memes about how the government going to come take their guns. There are things I actually really like about Christian films. I like that there's no subtext. I like that you know who the good guys are because they're Christian, and you know who the bad guys are because they're not Christian. Having watched so many of these movies, I get the impression that a lot of people who watch and make them, they feel like they're victims. But in order for that to make sense, they need to drastically change the world around them. They have to pretend that the government bans Bibles, or they mandate every single person to be gay, and being straight is illegal. Or, the worst case, they're not allowed to celebrate Christmas. And it's a weird way to see the world. And honestly, it's even a weirder thing to make movies about. Having watched so many of these films, here's my biggest takeaway. There's a lot of people out there making really bad art, and they're doing it without doubting themselves. They believe in their vision, and they believe that the world is better for it. I have a really hard time finishing projects. I'm worried that what I make won't have any value, and people won't like it, and they'll know that my dreams are stupid. And if you feel like that too, if you feel like doubt and fear and perfectionism is holding you back, then I invite you to ask yourself these 3 simple questions. Did Peter Engbert ask himself, hey, is it a bad idea for me to make a Christian film called Loving the Bad Man about a woman who becomes pregnant after she's raped and then she befriends her rapists and invites them to help her raise her child? Does Ray Comfort ever wonder if he made the world a little bit worse when he made his film Audacity, when he walked around with a camera and harassed dozens of gay people, reading them Bible verses and telling them that God doesn't love them? And do you think Donald J. Parker ever doubted himself when he made the Christian film Gramps Goes to College, where he wrote into the script them letting him, a 70-something man, share a dorm with an 18-year-old boy? He didn't even need to stay in that dorm. In the sequel to that film, In Gramps' Shoes, he has a perfectly fine house. He just wanted to be a jerk. Did any of those people let doubt stand in the way of their dreams, as dumb as their dreams were? Absolutely not. I may not agree with Christian films, but I know I'll keep going back, especially when I'm feeling really bad about my creative contribution to the world. The truth is, I will never make a film as awful as God's Not Dead. It's a really low bar, but I know I won't go under it. And if you're watching this, I'm confident it goes for you too. So in those moments of darkness and doubt, I urge you, look at yourself in the mirror and say, if they can make stuff, then so can I. Just please don't make Christian films. There's enough.